chat the link to that. If you will please go and sign up for our roll call. Also, if during the vote today, if you are voting no or abstaining, if you will please make sure that we have your name. And if you make a motion or a second, will you please state your name for the record, just so we can make sure that we have that for the minutes. Our first item of business is approval of the 7/15/20 meeting minutes. Are there any additions or corrections? Hearing none, do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
And who made our motion?
Victor Lay.
Thanks, Victor. And our second?
Faye DeMassimo.
Thanks, Faye. So we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll now move on to our public comments. Is there anyone here who would like to address this board at this time?
Yes.
Okay, if you will state your name and your address, and if you are representing an organization, if you could let us know that as well.
Good morning. Thank you for your service. My name is Mark Cleveland. I am the CEO and co-founder of Hitch Rewards. I am calling in with a question, perhaps for GNRC staff, and an update request on the status of the technology and transit grant that was passed unanimously by this body and related processes back in June of 2019. And I understand that there have been some process issues involving TDOT's Office of Local Programming, and I'm curious to understand if the board has been briefed or if we could see some updated information from staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cleveland. Sean, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Chair. Mark, we can give you a quick update on that. We did get a green light from TDOT Local Programs Office last week to proceed with the project initiation process, and so we submitted the 3 project initiation forms over to TDOT, I think this morning, and so that we're following through on the next steps, and we'll keep you posted as we work through that project initiation process with TDOT.
Excellent. There are 4, perhaps 5 total award projects that are looking forward to doing their public good in this time of need. On behalf of myself, I thank you for the update, and on behalf of the other award winners, we're excited to get to work.
Great. Thanks so much, Mark.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to address this board? Okay, seeing no one else, we will move on to our 2 action items today. The first one is the adoption of Resolution TPB 2020-04, which is amending the fiscal year 2020 through 2021 Unified Planning Work Program. And Sean, I think you're going to take this one.
Thank you, Mayor Reed. Just a quick background. I know that we've discussed updates to the Unified Planning Work Program in previous meetings. This amendment includes a couple of different categories of updates. One for additional planning activities. These are the planning activities that are carried out by GNRC with the MPO's planning funds. And then also adding additional related planning activities. And these are documenting some of the other planning activities that are being carried out in the region by transit agencies, TDOT, as well as local governments. And these would also be carried forward with other funding sources outside of the MPO's planning funds. And so we've gone through an amendment process, public review and comment period with the Unified Planning Work Program amendment. It's posted on our public notices on our webpage and has been endorsed by the Transportation Coordinating Committee. And so today we're seeking adoption from you all of the Unified Planning Work Program amendment following a public hearing.
Any questions for Sean on this? Okay, seeing no questions, we do need to hold a public hearing. So I will go to the public to see if there's anyone here to speak for or against this item. Seeing no one, I will go to this board to ask for a motion to adopt Resolution TPB 2020-04, amending fiscal year 2020 through 2021 Unified Planning Work Program. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for approval, Billy Vogel.
A motion by Billy Vogel. Mr. Holt, Mayor Holt, is that a second?
Absolutely.
Okay, so Billy Vogel has a motion and Anthony Holt has a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll now move on to our second action item today, which is adoption of Resolution TPB 2020-05, revising the organizational bylaws of the Transportation Policy Board. Michael, can you give us a brief overview of this? I know we talked about it at length at last meeting, but I just want to make sure everybody is aware of exactly what we're voting on.
I'm happy to do that. Good morning, everybody. This is Michael Skipper, Director of the Greater Nashville Regional. So what you have in your packet is a presentation of proposed edits to the organizational bylaws for the Transportation Policy Board. These bylaws are contained within the Transportation Planning Prospectus document that the NPO is responsible for publishing as a way of explaining to members of the public and key stakeholders the general process to carry out the federal transportation and planning requirements for the Nashville area NPO. There are a few specific revisions that have been discussed over the last couple of months by the Planning Oversight Committee, a committee that reports up through the Transportation Policy Board. Two of those specific revisions have been recommended for adoption today. One is being recommended for deferral until we get through the plan update and potentially get through the 2020 census. First item to be revised through the proposal today is a change to the process that is prescribed in the bylaws for the approval and payment of expenses incurred by the fiduciary for the
Where's
NPO.
the eye outfit's gonna go? She really loves this outfit. She's not gonna wear it today. I gotta do something more casual.
As long as everybody can still hear me. The process for the approval and payment by the fiduciary to the NPO, which is currently GNRC, as spelled out in the bylaws. Right now, the process, the way it has worked, and this is a process that's been in place for a couple of decades now, is that there is basically an oversight committee that works on behalf of the board to make sponsor agency for the NPO is incurring and approving expenses in a way that's consistent with the Unified Planning Work Program that you all adopt, which serves as the budget for the NPO program. So as you all know, the NPO staffing and administration has always been hosted by another organization. Since its inception, the NPO was housed and staffed and administered by the Metropolitan Planning Department of Nashville-Davidson County. And a couple of years ago, we integrated that NPO into the Greater Nashville Regional Council. So now the GNRC serves as the fiduciary for the NPO program on behalf of the Transportation Policy Board. So the proposed revision here, and this was offered up initially by Faye DeMassimo and Metro Nashville, was to remove the requirement that the Planning Oversight Committee concur with payments to the consultants. And in lieu of that formal concurrence by the Planning Oversight Committee. Instead, GNRC staff and administration would then provide regular updates on the status of NPO-related expenditures with documentation for how those things are consistent with the Unified Planning Program. So we're essentially just removing that formal concurrence by the Planning Oversight Committee through that revision. And then the other revision that's on the table is a just to provide some language that clearly permits under your own rules electronic virtual meetings in times when it is otherwise permitted by state law or as a result of a declaration of emergency, which is a situation we're in now. And we're meeting virtually, and I think it's we're meeting with confidence, but it makes sense to make that part of your own rules, so there's no question about that into the future. So those are the two revisions that are being presented to you for adoption. These were initially presented last month in accordance with your own bylaws that would have proposed revisions and amendments presented at one meeting and then automatically deferred to the subsequent meeting. That would be today. There is one more proposal that we have received from a member, from a jurisdictional member of our region, but not a voting member of the board. And that's that this body eventually consider expanding the voting membership of this board to municipalities of less than 5,000 people in population. So right now, the threshold for a municipality to have a voting seat on this board is set at 5,000. You're being asked, and staff is recommending that we defer this conversation until after plan update and the new census, but you're being asked to expand that voting membership to communities of less than 5,000 at some point in the future. So, Madam Chair, that is the quick overview of the two that are being moved to the table for consideration today.
Great, thanks, Michael. Any questions about this?
Mayor Reed, this is Preston Elliott from TDOT. We have looked over these changes and don't have any real problems with them. The only issue or question is the MPO's bylaws speak to an item being considered as an amendment to first be considered and then at the subsequent meeting. And I believe at last month's meeting, this was only presented as information. So I think from a formality, it would be to vote to consider it for the following meeting.
Michael, do you or Sean want to address that? I guess that's more of a legal question.
Well, I mean, a requirement that there be any action taken on the initial presentation, but this was introduced last month by you, Mayor Reed, the stated intent to adopt this month. So we have previously, our bylaws, we're following the same process we always have. So I'm not sure that your bylaws require you to formally endorse the idea that you be amending your bylaws at the next meeting. The whole reason why that rule is in place is to make sure that bylaws can't be amended without giving members proper notice to make their way to the meeting to weigh in on the amendment.
I guess.
So we can bring the actual language on screen and so everybody feels comfortable with the process.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here momentarily.
Can you see the revisions to the bylaws, Michael?
Yeah, so Sean, can you see my screen at the moment with the action from our bylaws?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so the provision that Preston is referencing is under Article 9, Section C. These bylaws may be amended by affirmative vote of a quorum of the policy board. A bylaws change will be presented for consideration at any board meeting, with adoption being deferred until a publicly noticed meeting. So they were presented formally at the last meeting. I think Preston is suggesting that there's a requirement here that you have to, as a body, go on record as saying that you're intending to amend the bylaws. Preston, is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I only raise it, we've had this bylaw changes in a few MPOs, and in all cases, they were presented for consideration as an action item for consideration, and then with the subsequent vote being at the following meeting, that's the only reason I raised the question.
Yeah, I understand that. I think the way our process is spelled out in our bylaws, it's that the bylaws need to be presented at a meeting and then deferred for action at a subsequent meeting. There's no specific requirement that there be any initial action taken by the board in order to do the actual approval.
And Michael, we actually talked about it, not only the meeting, last meeting, but we also talked about it the meeting prior, that we were going to be discussing it last meeting to then vote on it.
Right.
This meeting. So I think we were very clear about that.
Right. And I can attest to, we've probably had 3 or 4 bylaws amendments in my tenure since 2007, and this is the same procedure we followed in each of those cases.
Okay, I just wanted to point that out, but appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other board members that have concerns about this?
Mayor Reed, this is Rogers Anderson. I don't have a question about that, but I do have a question about, bear with me here, I'm working off my handheld. Article 6, Michael, item E, and it reads, the committee shall meet in person to conduct business unless meeting by electronic means is otherwise permitted by state law or through a declaration of emergency. Because this MPO meets in Davidson County, there could be conflicting electronic guidelines by the public health department in Davidson County versus the rest of the surrounding county. Your comments?
Yes, sir. I recognize that. We in a situation, just make sure I'm not muted. Okay. We certainly can be in a situation where the executive order is not extended to cover public meetings to be held virtually. And simultaneously, Davidson County social distancing guidelines make it difficult for us to meet in person in Davidson County. In that case, then we would facilitate an in-person meeting in a county where we would not be in violation of that county's social distancing requirements. And so we would just have to know that well enough in advance to properly notice. Having said that, I think the mayors who work together through the Mayor's Caucus have made it very clear that they intend to support the extension of the executive order permitting virtual meetings, hopefully through the rest of the year, so this doesn't create the uncomfortable position of sort of being in between those two places. But from our perspective, we want to be very clear that we will be following state law, and if we're just not permitted to meet in Davidson County because of local laws, then we will just have to look elsewhere for the meeting.
Mayor, if I could follow up with Michael, I don't question that. That wasn't the direction I was going. Let me rephrase it. If Mayor Cooper is through the public health department has got the executive order on, and the rest of the counties do not, then I think that weakens your rules and guidelines that we're voting on here. I don't know how to get around. I don't know how to answer it. If you're comfortable with it, but there could be a situation where there could be business needed to be conducted and you move outside of the area, which is fine. That's one answer to it. I just didn't want us to get into conflict here at some point from a legal standpoint that you would have different jurisdictions and different rules and who gets to make those calls. That's my only comment, Michael. If you're comfortable with it, I just know that right now it's a conflict for some of the counties. Could be, but it could be even more down the road. That's my point.
Yes, sir. I hear that. We're subject to the Tennessee Open Meetings Act, so unless that's exempted through executive order, then the expectation and the law would have us meeting in person like any other public body. And if we're not allowed to do that in Davidson, then we would just have to find an alternative location.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Then I will ask for a motion to adopt resolution TPB 2020-05, revising the organizational bylaws to the Transportation Policy Board. Do I have a motion?
Paige Brown, motion to approve.
Paige, do I have a second?
Second, Anthony Holt.
Thanks, Mayor Holt. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes. We'll now move on to our informational items. Our first informational item is proposed amendments to the fiscal year 2020 through 2023 TIP. And Anna, I think you're going to take this.
Thank you so much, Mayor Reed. Appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. We have 10 proposed amendments for your consideration here in this last amendment cycle of fiscal year 2020. The bulk of these are related to CMAQ funds that have been awarded and provided by TDOT, and then we have a couple more on top of that. So we'll start going through the list here. Our first proposed amendment is for the Laverne Advanced Traffic Management System. This is proposing to add the project to the TIP with CMAQ funds awarded to the project by TDOT through the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program. Following that, we have a request from Vanderbilt University to add their Move BU program to the TIP. So the request is to add this project to the TIP with funds provided by TDOT through the CMAQ program. We have a request to add the Brentwood Signal System Upgrades project. This is also a project that was awarded to Brentwood through the TDOT CMAQ program. We have a request to add the Goodlettsville traffic flow improvements and traffic signal upgrades Phase 3 project to the TIP. This was also awarded by the TDOT CMAQ program. We have a request to add the Nashville Connector project for Metro Nashville, requesting to add this project to the TIP with funds awarded by the TDOT CMAQ program. And another request from Metro Nashville to add their West End and Broadway ITS communication upgrade project to the TIP, also awarded by the CMAQ program. And then a request from Walk Bike Nashville, who was also awarded funds to the TDOT CMAQ program for their Clean Trips to School project. Now we have a request from Gallatin for their East-West Corridor, which is their Albert Gallatin Avenue Hatton Track Road Extension project. And we are adding HIP funds to this project for construction-related cost overruns that they've experienced on this project. You'll remember in one of our earlier meetings this year, we passed a resolution to use highway infrastructure program funds that were allocated to the MPO by the federal government for projects that are already programmed in the TIP and experiencing cost overruns in either right-of-way or construction phases. Following that, we have a request from Murfreesboro for their Cherry Lane extension with I-840 interchange project. They had their construction funds in reserve, so we are officially programming those funds, as well as adding some funds for a right-of-way overage from Murfreesboro urbanized area funds that were previously in programs. And then we have a request from Smyrna for their Smyrna Signal System project, which is a phase 1 of a multi-phase ITS project that they have going on right now. We are adding CMAQ funds to this project that has been provided by TDOT. And I am happy to take any questions related to any of these proposed amendments at this time.
Anna, this is Rogers Anderson. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, sir.
How are you? On
Good,
your
how are you?
the tip number 2020-17-106 Vanderbilt, more of a explain to me. When I read the amendment description of what's going on here for the campus at Vanderbilt, would we do this same thing for Belmont? Would we do it for Lipscomb? Would we do it for Trevecca? Kind of help me get comfortable with this Move Vanderbilt program as opposed to some of the other programs that we have at other major universities.
Yeah, so Vanderbilt's currently undertaking a pretty large scale effort to kind of try to work on their transportation demand management strategies. And it kind of involves multiple things that they're doing to address congestion in and around campus, address the demand on their parking system on campus. I'm sure you're probably pretty familiar that they have a fair amount of real estate dedicated to parking over there on their campus that might be able to be better utilized in other ways. They're also trying to integrate just active type modes of transportation. Bike share and scooters are all being considered as part of this effort and how they can better integrate that into both the localized area public transit system as well as some of their private campus circulator transit services that they have over there. This is just something that Vanderbilt has decided to, kind of grab by the horns and run with. They're really interested in kind of being on the forefront of all of this. I'm not aware of a program like this that's taking place at any of the other local universities, but they have definitely been actively involved with both us and TDOT and actively seeking some funding opportunities to be able to pursue these advancements on their campus. And also, in order for it to be able to positively impact, our congestion and transit scenarios in the surrounding Nashville area, which of course they're very much a part of the fabric there.
And Anna, just to add on to the mayor's question, can you talk about the specific grant program that they've applied for and just verify that any of the area universities would otherwise have been eligible to apply as well?
Sure, yeah. So this was for TDOT's CMAQ program, the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, just recently. And of course, anybody online from TDOT that wants to speak to this is welcome to, but they've kind of just recently started partnering with some organizations that are undertaking efforts that would benefit these goals that are kind of outside of the local city and county agency arena. And just to Michael's point, yes, if another university could kind of outline and justify a similar type of they would be eligible to apply for this type of funding.
This is Preston Elliott. Mayor, to speak to your question about use of funds, if another university wanted to apply for the CMAQ program funds, they could. It's not necessarily limited to just one university. Even a major employer, the use of these funds are probably more limited in terms of what they can be used for versus who can apply for them. But as you know, I think the TMA group is a recipient of CMAQ funds and have used them in a variety of fashions to increase carpooling, vanpooling, and other transit related. So really, it's a program of strategies to address congestion through either investments in projects or programs that promote non-SOV use, so more of the ride sharing components of things, and or travel time, which would reduce the emissions that we see at intersections and so forth.
Thank you so much for that, Preston. I'll just add too, on top of Vanderbilt being a university, they're also one of the largest employers in the region. So, this is also a transportation demand management effort, aimed at all the commuters that are coming into that area of town that work at Vanderbilt, both at the university and at the hospital.
Other questions for Anna? Just a reminder that the amendments that Anna talked about are scheduled for adoption at our September 16th meeting. Thanks, Anna. We are now going to move on to our environmental quality and social equity analysis for the regional transportation plan. And Sean, I think you're going to present and then pass off.
I'm going to turn it quickly over to Ben Grambling here, our environmental planning manager, to walk you through some of the work that he and the data team have been working tirelessly on. And so take it away, Ben.
Thanks, Sean. Good morning, Mayor Reed and members of the board. Hopefully you can hear me okay this morning. I am happy to be here with you all to present the core elements of the policy brief we are in the process of drafting for use and guidance of the update to the regional transportation plan, and the brief focusing on environmental issues and trends across the 7-county region served by the MPO. We've got a lot of information to get through with this and the next section on social equity, so I hope to move fairly quickly, but hopefully we'll have a moment or two at the end of my segment or at the end of the equity segment to field questions or comments. But as I move quickly, I don't want to leave anybody behind. So if there are any needs to take a quick pause and answer a question along the way, feel free to jump in. The policy brief as it's being drafted is following a fairly consistent framework with what how the previous policy drafts that you've seen and others that are being developed are structured. We have structured this morning's slide presentation to generally follow the organization of the policy brief itself, and happy to go through that right now. So Sean, to the next slide. Why we at GNRC and why we think this topic matters to the region and the communities that we serve is in part because the Federal Highway Administration has developed expectations of us as the regional planning entity as embedded within the FAST Act of 2015 to either directly build in or to contemplate features within our long-range transportation document that look at environmental sustainability issues, look at opportunities to reduce transportation project delivery delays, and importantly, more recently, there's been an increased focus on improved system resiliency, largely in response to extreme weather events. But certainly our experience this year with COVID certainly elevates the need to look at system resiliency in other ways as well. And it's important to note that the federal government has increased attention and brought forth resources to really support the application of a concept known within the transportation planning world as planning and environmental linkages in order to improve the ways in which our work products address environmental factors across the region. And I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But it's also worth pointing out here that, as you all know, our regional economy and quality of life across all of our communities depend on access to quality natural environment and a protection of our abundant sociocultural resources. And lastly, it's been the case within GNRC that we have a strong desire to expand the usefulness of all of our planning processes and work products where we can. And we've invested significant time over the course of the last year and a half in elevating the way in which we can advance environmental planning across the region. In looking at the next slide, which describes how we're approaching planning environmental linkages in a graphic manner, the diagram at the center of this slide intends to simplify the often complex and dynamic interaction between transportation projects and the transportation planning process and environmental conditions where those investments are being advanced. And on the right-hand side of the graphic, we see that the transportation planning process and projects as they're implemented, this is the easier to understand, I think, as those projects are advancing, there is an opportunity for those investments to have an adverse impact on environmental conditions. There are environmental issues or conditions that can be harmed or threatened by a transportation project moving forward. But also importantly, within our work, we need to understand how environmental conditions may impact projects as they move forward also. And that's what we've referred to historically as environmental challenges. Those are environmental factors that increase the complexity of a transportation project because it is a project that becomes harder to design or engineer or perhaps permit, or the cost of construction or maintenance over time becomes more difficult because of the environment in which that transportation project is being advanced. And it's our role to really understand kind of both sides of that coin, both sides of that dynamic. Over the past year, our planning and environmental linkages work, if you just hold on that last slide for a quick second, Sean. Over the past year, our planning and environmental linkages work has really been focused on understanding current environmental conditions, how they may impact or be impacted by projects, and importantly, and we'll get to this a little later this morning, the broader regional growth trends that are emerging across our region, and then developing an approach to analyzing proposed transportation projects, and here in this case, within the context of the regional transportation plan update, and providing valuable feedback to project sponsors that can help them minimize negative environmental impacts and ideally accelerate project delivery as projects move forward. And going forward, our work is likely to involve enhanced sharing of environmental information across a broad range of stakeholders. So in looking at the environmental conditions themselves on the next slide, we've organized the resources that we're bringing forward to you in 4 different categories: air, water, land, and sociocultural resources. And it's important to point out that a number of these issues are implicated directly during a project's environmental phase and in the development of NEPA-related documentation, but there are other environmental conditions that might not be directly implicated in NEPA, and we're taking just as close of a look at those other environmental issues as we are those that are directly built into to NEPA, for example. There's a lot of underlying data and analysis and even more detail than we will show you today that we shared with the TCC earlier this month. And we're really trying to bring forward the most salient points and data for you today. Many of these data sets were provided by other agencies and aggregated and analyzed by our research team. And I also want to point out that this work has been informed by members of our relatively newly established Regional Environmental Roundtable that's met now 3 times over the course of the last 5 or 6 months. And we're really happy to have the engagement of members of that Regional Environmental Roundtable as well. So I'm going to quickly go through each of these 4 categories, and we'll start with air quality. This map shows the 7-county planning region and the distribution of the ambient air quality monitoring stations managed by the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, which are gathering information on a regular basis for ozone, small particulate matter, which is PM 2.5, carbon monoxide, and NOx constituents as well. As you all probably know, the entire planning region has been in attainment for some time as it relates to federal air quality standards, and we are not expecting that designation to change anytime soon based on recent trends. If we move to the next slide, we have an overall characterization of water resources, in which case we focused on 3 core issues. 1, the extent of surface water bodies and how we may be impacting the extent of the water bodies themselves, the water quality within those water bodies, and the distribution of FEMA delineated floodplains across the region. This particular slide shows the extent of watershed boundaries across our planning region, the 3 larger watersheds being the Cumberland, both the upper and lower Cumberland, the lower Tennessee River, and the Green River in the northern corner of our service area, which ultimately drains northward through Kentucky and empties into the Ohio River. While we're not showing much watershed level detail at the smaller watersheds depicted on this graphic, the policy brief itself will break down some of the water resource data and conclusions into those smaller geographic scales. We just wanted to show you the bigger picture here across the region, and make sure everybody knows that a vast majority of our nearly 4,000 square mile service area drains into and through the Cumberland River, with a much smaller percentage draining through the Tennessee and the Green River to the north. When looking at the extent of wetlands across the region, we have a total of 26,807 square miles, or I'm sorry, 26,807 acres of wetlands across the region. A vast majority of those acres of wetlands fall within forested wetlands and freshwater pond wetlands, with a smaller percentage of those wetlands being located adjacent to streams or rivers. Moving to the next slide, showing the extent of streams across the 7-county region. There are a total of 5,000, just over 5,000 miles of streams that have been assessed by TDEC on a regular basis in order to determine water quality conditions within those streams, and all of that's done pursuant to the Federal Clean Water Act. And in the assessment work that TDEC has done, 29% of those stream miles have been characterized as being threatened or impaired, meaning that the water quality conditions within those streams do not support their intended use, which again is a classification built into the Federal Clean Water Act. And for our work, more specifically within the context of transportation planning and potential water quality considerations, we focused on a smaller set of water quality impairments that are due more so to impacts associated with transportation projects and land uses linked to transportation infrastructure. And if we look at that smaller subset of impaired waters, we see that 17% of the 5,000 miles assessed across our 7-county region are considered to be impaired or threatened. And you see that those impaired water bodies, due to those key parameters, are distributed fairly significantly across the entire 7-county region of the MPO service area. Moving to the next slide, I'm sure that you all are very familiar with what's at stake when it comes to flood risk. The region as a whole and communities across our 7 counties have seen significant property loss of human life, and disruption of services largely because of the obviously the significant storm-related flooding dating back to 2010, but even more recently, there have been very significant impacts associated with flooding across the region. The transportation sector has also focused more recently, as I mentioned previously, on maximizing system resiliency in response to extreme weather events. And we want to take a look at understanding how our region is kind of performing when it comes to flood risk across the region. So we have mapped FEMA floodplains across the MPO region and calculated values for the 100-year and 500-year floodplains in all of our 7 counties. And the data here at left on the slide shows that within the 100-year floodplain, there are just over 18,000 properties that have some portion of them falling within that 100-year floodplain. And the total assessed value for land and structures on those 18,000 properties total $2.9 billion. If we look at lands outside of that 100-year floodplain, but still within the 500-year floodplain, we have totaled an additional 6,800, almost 6,900 properties, totaling an additional $2.8 billion of assessed value. That is a significant amount of property value that is standing in harm's way and that we need to be taking into consideration as we move forward with our planning work. Moving now to a series of land-based environmental assets. We've worked with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency to obtain and evaluate data from their most recent state wildlife action plan. This map here shows a subset of what they have determined to be priority habitat areas across the 7-county region, and they organize them by different habitat types first. You see those 4 categories on the left of this slide: aquatic habitat, aquatic upstream habitat, terrestrial, and subterranean habitat. And they have a series of rating scales for each of those 4 categories of habitat. We've lifted up the high priority and very high priority habitat areas for all 4 of those categories and map them here again. And you see a fairly significant distribution across the range of the region served by the MPO. Moving to canopy coverage, on the next slide, we have mapped the extent of canopy coverage across the 7-county region and categorized canopy coverage into 4 different ranges shown here on this map in different shades of green: low, moderate, moderately low, moderately high, and high density. And what we see here is that a fairly significant portion of the region as a whole has a very significant healthy canopy coverage. Almost 50% of our region has moderately high or high density canopy coverage, which is a really interesting fact. Moving to the next slide, we've calculated the prevalence of prime agricultural soils as classified by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and we've calculated that 778,000 acres of land across the 7-county region have the presence of prime agricultural soils, which is 31% of our total land mass across the 7-county region. And we've also mapped the distribution of 33 century farms that are located within our service area. Those, you may know, are farms that have been in family ownership for at least 100 years straight. And lastly, I wanted to point out that we were hoping to include as part of our analysis data that we are aware is being developed by the American Farmland Trust that describes farms under threat across the region, which is part of a broader effort to characterize farms under threat across the country. But that data is not yet available to us, and we hope to include that in future analyses. Lastly, the category of sociocultural resources. This map shows the distribution of historic sites and districts, parks and recreation, religious institutions, and academic institutions. You'll see these are widely scattered across the region, but perhaps more concentrated in Davidson, Williamson, and Rutherford counties. And I also wanted to point out that the policy brief will address 2 additional categories of sociocultural resources: cemeteries and burial grounds, and archaeological sites as well. But those are less conducive to a mapping application here in this presentation. So when we think about the current conditions of environmental assets across the region, we are then asking ourselves to consider how those resources may change over the time span of the Regional Transportation Plan update. And we've identified a series of threats and risk factors to consider as part of that question. We've identified population growth and development patterns, policy and regulatory changes that may be underway, and climate uncertainty as the 4 key threats and risk factors. The presentation this morning is going to focus on the first 2 of these 4, but we will be including discussion of the 3rd and 4th item on this list in the policy brief itself. So if we look at population growth on the next slide, I'm sorry, we're looking at just the development pattern for 2045 first. I'm sorry, Sean. This is data that you have probably seen previously in either previous Transportation Policy Board meetings or also at a special joint workshop held back on June 19th of this year. This map is showing projected development out to 2045, which shows an increase in developed parcels by 13% across the region. And clearly we see a significant potential threat associated with the increase in developed parcels across the region. The next slide shows population density out to 2045. Again, a very significant increase across the 7-county region. And again, this is data that you've probably already seen. And so for us, the next step in the process is to merge our understanding of current environmental conditions with these growth projections. And then we hope to draw some useful conclusions about how the transportation project delivery process and the environment will interact going forward. And on the next slide, as I'm sure you all might expect, we see significant potential for increased environmental conflicts, as I described them previously, environmental challenges, increase in the potential complexity and cost of transportation projects, and we also see potential increases in environmental controversy resulting from the transportation planning and project development process. And the next series of slides will show how we're approaching those sets of issues and how we will evaluate projects and the broader impacts that growth may have on our region. So on the next slide, it may be slow on my end, just on my end. Sean, are you seeing the next slide?
Yeah, I have the ESAs up on mine.
Okay. All right. All right. Now I've got it. Might be lagging on other people's machines as well. But here we have the characterization of how we evaluate projects as part of the Unified Transportation Planning process. We aggregate many of the data sets that we just ran through very quickly for you this morning into one composite layer that we refer to as environmentally sensitive areas. We then evaluate how a project will interact with the composite ESA as well as the individual data components. The individual data components that comprise the ESA are identified in the list on the right-hand side of the slide. And again, keep in mind that we evaluate environmental conflicts, which are the potential impacts a project will have on the environment, and environmental challenges, which are factors that may complicate a project as it is developed. Our ESA, when taken together across the entire 7-county region, covers 2,400 square miles, which is 62% of the total landmass of the 7-county region. When looking at that same ESA layer that's on this slide and compare it to development that existed in 2017, we see an overlap of 626 square miles, or basically a quarter of the ESA being impacted by development that existed in 2017. So 26% of the ESA, you could think of it as 26% of the ESA is being threatened by existing development. We take that same ESA layer and combine it with the forecasted development out to 2045, and we see a significant increase in that overlap from 26% to 71% of the ESA being threatened by development. That is an increase of nearly 1,100 square miles. And what that can ultimately mean for transportation planning and the project delivery process is, the potential for increased threats to water quality and flood risk, impacts to habitat, including habitat fragmentation and the loss of natural wildlife corridors, potential conflicts with sites that may be eligible for listing on the National Register for Historic Places, and other potential environmental conflicts and challenges based on information that we're looking at. Luckily, we also have the ability to bring forward strategies that a range of entities can consider that can have a resulting minimization in those adverse environmental impacts. And so we have developed a list of strategies and examples of actions that can be taken to minimize the impact on environmental and sociocultural resources. And as a part of the plan update process, we've really focused on the first strategy identified here. Sean, it's still lagging on my end, so I hope that people are still seeing the, all right, now I've got it, the table in front of me, the list of strategies and example actions that can be taken as part of them. So as I was saying, as part of the plan update process, we at GNRC have really focused on that first strategy of outreach and coordination. We've engaged the Regional Environmental Roundtable. We've enhanced the data sets that we've been using throughout this process. We've been working with TDOT and FHWA to guide this process and working towards a more integrated and robust PEL framework to utilize going forward in our transportation planning role across the region. It's helpful, I think, to point out that the remaining strategies, avoidance and mitigation in particular, are specific strategies that are perhaps most appropriately applied at the project level. And part of our project evaluation and the feedback that we will be bringing back to project sponsors will include information that will put them in a better position to engage in avoidance and mitigation measures as they advance their project investments. And then lastly, land management and protection and preservation strategies are actions that can be taken across the range of governmental functions, both at the regional and county and local level as work proceeds in communities across the region. And the last slide I have for you is a list of actions that we'll be recommending to you as part of the final draft plan that will be coming a bit later in the process. These are actions that we can take during the life of the plan and not actions that we're going to be on the hook to take in the next few months between now and February 2021. But what we want you to consider is actions that can be taken into the future that involve setting ambitious environmentally oriented goals and tracking performance over time, prioritizing transportation investments that have minimal impact, and ideally also prioritizing investments that have the ability to enhance opportunities for conservation and preservation, implementing a formal PEL framework to link regional planning that takes place at a number of different levels across the region and the transportation project development process. And lastly, expanding the purpose of the Regional Environmental Roundtable that I mentioned to have them participate in establishing a shared vision for regional conservation and preservation. And I guess the last slide that I'll land on is really just an opportunity for me to reference the really great resources that have been amassed on GNRC's website, largely at the leadership of our research and analytics department. They've been incredibly valuable in compiling the information that I've presented to you this morning. And we can move on to the social equity segment, unless, Sean, you want to open up an opportunity to field any questions or comments.
I think just given we're a little bit over on time. I think we're going to defer the social equity presentation until next month's meeting so that we can cover the remaining 2 informational items, if that's okay with everyone.
I think that sounds like a good plan.
Okay, well, I'll give a quick introduction for this agenda item. You may recall that back in February we set roadway safety performance targets as part of our annual update, and as part of that discussion, we are kind of picking up where we left off to discuss the TPB's support for creating their own regional targets as part of the regional transportation plan development process. And so just a recap, if we look at federal legislation, there's a national goal to achieve a significant reduction in traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And so as part of the last update in February, as part of the annual update for targets, the TPB elected to continue supporting the state targets. And we're going to present a couple of different scenarios for regional targets within the Nashville area NPO. And doing that as part of the 2045 RTP process will then allow us to refer to those for future updates to this regional targets for safety. So the question that's come up a lot is, what if the targets are not met? And so we've had some discussion on this at TCC and TPB meetings, but FHWA doesn't directly assess progress towards regional targets for safety. That would be set by the Transportation Policy Board. It's primarily focused on the state targets, and so if state targets for safety are not met, then TDOT will not be permitted to use or flex federal safety funds, known as the Highway Safety Improvement Program funds, to other types of projects. And so, if through the assessment there's not progress towards the targets, statewide targets, then TDOT would be required to obligate that HSIP funding to safety projects only. They wouldn't be able to flex it. And then I think there's another stipulation of TDOT would be required to develop an implementation plan to improve safety outcomes within the state. And so there's a number of associated efforts to improve safety, spanning the state level, transit agencies, local governments, as well as GNRC. Part of that process is through our regional transportation plan. The state also develops a strategic highway safety plan that really outlines a state coordinated plan to providing a framework for reducing fatalities and serious injuries. Public transit agencies are now being required to develop a safety plan of their own. As I mentioned, safety performance targets that we adopt. And then lastly, just the Highway Safety Improvement Program, identifying funding for safety projects to be advanced through the Transportation Improvement Program. And so what we're going to be presenting today are a couple of different scenarios for regional targets. We're starting with, there are 5 different measures that we look at, but the one that we're starting with today to focus on is the number of traffic fatalities. And so I'll outline, go through quickly the scenarios, and then I'll turn it over to Ashley to take you through kind of the data-driven approach to coming up with those. And so the first one is kind of the status quo of what we've done in the past of supporting the state's targets. Number 2 would be to cap traffic fatalities. And so looking at kind of the baseline number of 197 traffic fatalities within our region, of not exceeding that number over the life of the plan. Number 3 would be a 1% annual reduction, and so this would be an annual decrease of 1% compounding out 25 years to 2045. Number 4 would be a 50% overall reduction by 2045. And then lastly, a vision zero or a greatest reduction, utilizing kind of the single largest gains or drops in traffic fatalities year after year upon year, and compounding that out 16% annually, an annual decrease each year out to 2045. So Ashley, you're ready. I'll let you take it from here to explain further these different scenarios.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Okay, so we're looking at 5 that we initially took a look at, plus the option of supporting the state's targets. And from this table, we can see that the state's target for 2015 to 2019 was 1,022 fatalities. And they do not set a target out to 2045, but we wanted to include their target from 2016 to 2020 just to give a frame of reference. And they have the 2016-2020 target set at 1,043.4 fatalities. The state's targets are established using the rate of fatalities. While the rate is declining, the actual number of fatalities is increasing, but the VMT is increasing much faster than the number. So while their fatality rate is decreasing, their target for fatalities ultimately ends up increasing. So the proposed options we are presenting look at the number of fatalities and then using the forecasted VMT to calculate the rate. This method keeps the number of fatalities constant or declining while still accounting for the increase in VMT that is expected. And as we can see from the options up on the table, the CAP scenario, as Sean had indicated, assumes that we keep that 2015-2019 baseline the same year to year, which equates to about 197 fatalities per year. Then if we look at the 1% annual reduction option, this basically equates to about 181 fatalities a year. And then if we look at the 50% overall reduction by the year 2045, this works out to about a 2.6 annual decrease on average a year, with an average of about 141 fatalities a year. We're going to get down to close to vision zero, where we're looking at the greatest reduction that we've ever seen in history, or at least since 2005. And this target basically works out to about 39 fatalities per year. And if we want to go to the next slide, this is just showing a graphical distribution of those targets. So the first line you're seeing is the CAP scenario. So we keep the 5-year baseline the same, and it sets basically the 2045 target at about 197 fatalities. And then if we go to option 2, which is the 1% annual reduction, that gets us to a target of about 152 for 2045. And the way that works out mathematically, that saves about 638 lives by the year 2045. And then if we look at scenario 3, the 50% overall reduction, we're looking at a target of 99 by 2045, and this ultimately saves over 1,400 lives by that year. And then if we take on vision zero, or the approximate vision zero, we are looking at a target of 2 by 2045, and that would save just under 5,000 lives by 2045. Now I'll hand it back over.
Thank you, Ashley. That was great. So as Ashley mentioned, she's outlined the number of different scenarios that range from least aggressive to most aggressive. And so moving forward, we just wanted to present these to you today to initiate this conversation. And what we've done is we presented to the TCC as well, and then relayed this information to you all. And we've compiled a survey that we would like you to take. We've already sent it around to the TCC members. We'd also like to send that around to you all after this meeting as a follow-up for you to complete. And that will help us narrow down these scenarios to a more manageable number, and start to prioritize so that we can recommend one moving forward that has the support of the TCC as well as the Transportation Policy Board. And so we'll send that survey around for you to complete. If there's any questions related to this, we can take those now.
Since there's no questions for Sean, I just want to remind you that we're scheduled to endorse the roadway safety performance targets at our next month's board meeting. Sean, anything else on this?
No, not on this topic.
Okay, so we'll move on to item D, which is weighing regional goals to prioritize projects and transportation needs for the regional transportation plan. Daniel?
Thanks, Mayor Reed. Sean, if you could move the next slide. So back in December and January, the TCC and TPV voted to support the RTP policy framework, which included goals, objectives, and measures. And as you know, these goals guide investment in the regional transportation plan and are the foundation for what we hope to accomplish with the projects that were submitted. Next slide, Sean. And earlier this week, we asked you to weight these goals in order of importance using a pairwise exercise from a program called Decision Lens. So each of you should have received an email from me asking you to complete the pairwise exercise. And then these weights will be used in our project evaluation to score projects based on which goals you all deem the most important. So for example, the exercise will ask you to weight the importance of improving safety versus maintaining state of good repair, as you see on the screen, from equal to extremely more important. Thank you to those of you who have already taken the activity. As of this morning, 3 people from TPB have taken it, but we have a little more than half from TCC who have taken it. So if everyone could complete the exercise by the end of the week, that'd be awesome. I know there have been some glitches recently with the registration emails. So if any of you have any issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to me and I can help you troubleshoot any problems you might have. And with that, I'll hand it back to Sean.
Thank you, Daniel. And I'll just add that we were going to preview some of the initial results, but we don't want to influence you taking this exercise. And so we'll hold off on that, even though we do have some results from TCC and a few of you all until you get the opportunity to participate in that exercise.
Great, thanks, Sean. We'll now move into our regular reports. One of the things that we have added for our regular reports is a report each month from Federal Highway. And so I'm not sure, Pam, are you going to take this?
Mayor Reed, this is Sabrina David from Federal Highway.
Great.
Hi, good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sabrina David. I am the Deputy Division Administrator from Federal Highway Tennessee Division. And also on the line from our office is Sean Santaya. So I have a few updates. So one, we appreciate, earlier y'all had voted on the amendments for the UPWP. So we very much, appreciate the MPO taking the time to kind of review the planning activities for the upcoming fiscal year 21 and kind of adjusting the activities is such. So the next item, y'all were talking about the safety target. So we recognize, the consideration by the MPO whether to adopt MPO specific targets for the safety performance measures, is up to you or adopt the state. So that was a very good discussion, and appreciate the reminder. We have been getting a lot of questions about, is Federal Highway going to assess the MPO's achievement of these targets? So I'm glad to see that was listed in there. So we will only be assessing the state's performance, but all the projects that y'all undertake, through the MPO and local agencies, will assist throughout the state to reducing those serious injuries and fatalities, whether you adopt a specific target or not. So it'll all go toward saving lives in Tennessee. Just as a reminder, those safety targets are required to be updated by the to be set by the MPOs by February 27th. So. Next, just as a reminder, if y'all, we're coming to the end of the FAST Act legislation. So September 30th, 2020 is when the FAST Act ends. So as soon as we receive information about the next reauthorization, we will gladly share that information at a future board meeting. The other, the census, as you know, the census is ongoing, and so we know that the outputs is very much a part of the from the census will be part of the planning process and funding decisions. So as you consider supporting that effort. So as according to the census U.S. site, the U.S. Census site, Tennessee self-response rate at the time was currently 63%, as in comparison to Tennessee's response rate as reported by the Tennessean was 76% back in October 2010. So this next one, hopefully, we'll have good, as comparison from 2010 to now 2020. So that's hopefully we will continue to see those census, the data increase for Tennessee. And as usual, I know there was discussion about, about adding the virtual meetings as part of the amending the bylaws. So again, we appreciate the efforts of the MPO to continue to find ways to be responsive to the kind of ongoing situation and offering those virtual meetings. So that is all I have from Federal Highway. Is there any questions?
Great. Thanks, Sabrina. We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to the TDOT report. Commissioner Bright, I see you're on with us as well. We appreciate that. I don't know, Commissioner, is there anything you'd like to add today?
Thank you, Mayor Reed. No, I don't really have anything to add, though something that I've mentioned in previous meetings that's on my mind, and I know y'all are still working on it, but just the continued push with the municipalities to spend the STBG funds that we have, which I think is right now is around 134 million. So still have a desire to put those dollars to work, and anything we can do to help that, we're certainly interested in doing that. Mayor Reed.
Commissioner, thanks so much. I know when we were able to sit down about the transportation plan, we kind of talked about maybe getting back together to have some of those discussions. So maybe we can get back to do that because I agree. I think we need to look into that, as well as making you all aware of some of the things that we feel that are slowing that process down. So I think communication is going to be key. So we look forward to that. Preston, are you taking the update today?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. First, I want to say thank you to MPS staff. Excellent presentations on the environmental factors. Those are some things that are very important in the plan process. And I'm not sure if everyone knows, but Ben will be one of two MPO presenting on planning and environmental linkage next week at a virtual MPO meeting that we're having. So glad to see the works and efforts there and how they relate to what we're doing and how we can mitigate or avoid environmental impacts. Also on the safety front, I know in years past there's been some uncertainty about the position of measures as it relates to safety. We very much support any urban area that wants to establish targets that can help reduce fatalities and serious injuries. So I applaud the efforts of the staff of working through the data. I know in years past we didn't have the granularity with the data. Now that we do, that allows and affords urban areas to take a much more aggressive stance and position on how to address safety. So applaud those efforts as well. Just want to hit, I've kind of mentioned it in the past, funding grant opportunities that the department has available. A couple that are still out there is the Improve Act Transit Capital Grant, and notices of intent to apply are between now and August 21st. So a little bit of time. Thank you for showing that there, Sean. Appreciate it. There's eligibility criteria about how much dollars that we have available. and then the match requirement. And I know within the Nashville MPO area, there's been a couple of transit agencies that have been recipients in years past. So we look forward to receiving grant submittals this coming round as well. The other grant opportunity is the Transportation Alternatives Program. And applications are being received between now and October 2nd. And the match requirement on that is 20%. So these funds here are a little bit different than our multimodal access grant funds, but still a great grant opportunity to provide alternative transportation improvements such as non-motorized accommodations and so forth. Let's see, I think that is primarily it. Appreciate the partnership and coordination.
Great, thanks, Preston. Any questions for Preston or TDOT? Okay, I'll move on to Chair's report. First of all, I really want to thank staff and all of the member jurisdictions of the MPO. I know that you all have worked really hard to maintain our updated schedule for our plan adoption that we sent out last month. The schedule is designed to make sure that we're completing that necessary work so that we meet our deadline of February 2021 so that our board can adopt the plan. While most of you have worked really hard to make sure that we've gotten everything in and not fallen behind, I know that GNR staff is waiting on some more information and some projects from a few of your jurisdictions. So if you could go back and check with your staff to make sure all the information that our GNR staff needs is complete, that would really be a huge help. Preston, I saw the email that was sent to you, so I really appreciate you looking into the things that we need help from to make sure we stay on task in regards to TDOT. I can't stress enough, while the GNRC staff is doing everything to absorb any delays, we also have to take responsibility as jurisdictions to make sure we're getting them the information they need so that we can be successful. So I encourage each one of you to go back and talk to your staff to make sure that we're providing them what they need. Let's see, I don't think there's anything else from me. Sean, anything from you before we wrap up?
I'll just add on that a lot of the interactions that we've had with the local governments, transit agencies, and TDOT have been through these county workshops. And so really successful round one of workshops over the course of July. As Mayor Reed mentioned, we're just trying to finalize some of the updates and clarify some of the project termini alignments so that staff can be confident going through the evaluation process, which is kicked off. We just are holding on to a couple of projects that still need to be fleshed out before we attach all of the project level data that we're using to go through our evaluation process. And so the round two, I know that we were initially targeting the August 10th through 28th, and so those dates for round two will probably be pushed back a couple of weeks just as we need some time in order to get through our evaluation process. But we're looking forward to working with the counties again, county by county basis to really flush out some of these project details and identify some opportunities to improve the project scopes.
Great. Anything else, Sean?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Great. I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff and all of our partner agencies. I know the last couple of months have been really difficult. We're all trying to get our footing in how to make sure that business continues on as, quote, normal. And I think you all have done an amazing job. We all really appreciate it. To each one of those mayors out there, I also want to thank you. I know the times have not been easy, but I cannot tell you how proud I am to work alongside each one of you in making sure that the needs of our citizens are top priorities. So thanks for all that you're doing. And if there is nothing else to come before this board, then we are
Chair.
adjourned. Oh, yes.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to make sure everybody sticks around for the executive board immediately following this transportation policy board. We do have important action items and will require a quorum. So we'll get started with that as soon as we roll off this meeting.
And a reminder that we need to roll off this meeting and then check in through roll call and to go on to the GNRC meeting, correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Okay. If there's nothing else, then we are adjourned until September 16th. Have a great month.